If that's good with everyone. All right. Well, now we're recording. Perfect. So, hello everyone. Welcome to the November 2022 Advocacy in Action webinar. I'm really glad you can make it, and I hope you're doing well going into the holiday season. Now the dust is largely settled on the 2022 midterms, so I thought it'd be helpful for us to review the results of the midterms and kind of talk about how they're going to affect O&P, both at the federal and the state level. But before I get into the details, I'd want to acknowledge my sources. I've pulled information from Bloomberg, Politico, and the National Conference of State Legislatures for this presentation. And some results are still kind of coming down the pipe. So be sure to kind of keep checking in on these as the next weeks and months progress, because things aren't going to be decided completely yet. With that in mind, I'd like to start with the Senate. So as predicted, the Democrats have maintained control of the Senate. They have 50 seats as of right now, after key victories in Arizona, Nevada, and Pennsylvania. But the full results won't be known until December 6th, when there's going to be a runoff election in Georgia between Herschel Walker and Senator Raphael Warnock. This election is very important for a couple of reasons. One, it will decide whether the vice president, Kamala Harris, will be the tiebreaker for votes that are kind of split along party lines, 50-50. And it'll also determine the influence of some swing vote Democrats like Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, whose influence will largely depend on whether or not the split of the parties is 50-50 or 51-49. And now that the elections are kind of turning their attention only to Georgia in the Senate, there's going to be a hotly contested race in the next few weeks, and you're going to see a lot of money and people pouring into the state to make sure that the vote goes one way or the other. So here's a map, a visualization of the Senate results. The states with a senator up for election are in red or blue, depending on the results. And states in light gray didn't hold a Senate election, as they only elect a third of the Senate every 2 years. So there's some elections of interest to note. The source of the Democrats' 51 to 59 possible majority are in Pennsylvania, where John Fetterman beat Mehmet Oz, which flipped the state blue. Previously, this seat was held by a Republican, Pat Toomey, who's now retiring. So that's the reason why it may not be a direct 50-50 split down the middle. In Oklahoma, Mark Wayne Mullen, he was a former congressman and actually a co-sponsor of HR 1990, our bill. He won a special election to be an Oklahoma senator. He replaced Jim Inhofe, who retired early and did not choose to finish out his term. So that's kind of it's a detriment to our advocacy efforts in the House, because we are losing a co-sponsor, but we are gaining a possible co-sponsor in the Senate. So I think it's a pretty good thing, because there are less senators and each one is a little more influential because of that. And finally, although Alaska hasn't been called, it will be held by a Republican, and this is due to Alaska's ranked choice voting system. So the top two candidates are Senator Lisa Murkowski and then her challenger, Kelly Tshibaka. They're both Republican, and since neither has won the majority yet, the candidate with the lowest votes, his name's Buzz Kelly, he'll be eliminated. And the voters that ranked him first will then have their second choice vote be counted for that candidate. So if I voted for Buzz first and Lisa second, then my vote for Buzz will get kind of taken away, and then my vote will count towards Lisa Murkowski. So in the House, as of today, actually, the Republicans have taken control of the House of Representatives. While they've held the advantage as the opposition party in a midterm, which usually sees some gains as opposed to the party in power, they did have a narrow path to the majority for a much longer time than a lot of analysts and pollsters expected, which is a good thing, even though it's a good thing for them, even though they did end up losing control of the House. As you can see right now, it's 218 to 211, which is much closer than people anticipated. So this is a geographic distribution of the House midterm elections. And the undecided votes, as you can see, are lightly colored as opposed to the fully colored ones that are decided. Most of these undecided races are in California, and that's due to the large amount of mail-in ballots in that state. In California, mail-in ballots, they can be counted up to a week after the election, as long as they're postmarked on or before election night. I believe it's around 8 p.m. Pacific time. That's when the last votes can be counted. Because of this, the results are likely not going to be known for another maybe week or so, because they're still counting ballots that just only recently have been sent in. So while the Democrats did lose the House, again, they've largely viewed it as a win because the opposition party usually picks up a lot more seats than the Republicans have so far. And this fact will certainly shake up the strategy that both parties are going to use going into the 118th Congress. So what do these results mean for federal legislation related to O&P? Overall, things are looking pretty good. These are two charts of the current co-sponsors of the Medicare O&P Patient-Centered Care Act, the House version and the Senate version. And there are 37 total co-sponsors right now. And of that number, only 5 will not be returning to next year's Congress. Representative Butterfield is not seeking re-election. Representative McKinley lost in the 2022 primary. Mark Wayne Mullen was elected to the Senate, as I mentioned previously. Cynthia Axne she lost in the 2022 general. She's actually one of the only incumbents to lose from the Democratic Party or either party in general. There were, I think, around 10 to 20 incumbents that lost only out of 435 members of the House. So that's pretty good in terms of keeping things stable from one Congress to another, but unfortunately one of them was one of our co-sponsors. And then Representative Jackie Walorski passed away in this summer unexpectedly, which is awful to say the least. And then in the House, or in the Senate, sorry, all 3 of the senators that were up for election won. So things are looking exactly the same going into the next Congress in terms of the Senate sponsors of the Medicare O&P Patient-Centered Care Act. And things are also looking pretty good for the legislation that we're working on, that we're advocating for in recent months. Of the 11 co-sponsors of the Wounded Warrior Bills and the Hannah Vankera Service Act, only 1 member will not be returning to Congress next year. That's Alan Lowenthal, who's not running for re-election. And such a high co-sponsor retention rate, it really does create some great conditions for advocacy leading into next year. Bills will need to be reintroduced in the new session because they don't carry over from one to the other. But having this foundation of policymakers that have previously supported our efforts, it really speeds up the co-sponsorship process. So we can say, hey, you co-sponsored this last Congress, I think you should consider doing the same again. And that makes it a lot easier than forming a new relationship with the person that takes that seat. And in addition, it allows us to have more bandwidth to reach out to any new co-sponsors that we may want to target. So federal advocacy it's a lengthy iterative process, and these results are actually going to help us maintain a lot of momentum as we move into the future. So moving on to the state level elections, This is a map of the state legislatures provided by the National Conference of State Legislatures. This denotes whether a state house is controlled by one party or another, or whether it's a divided legislature. As you can see, the legislators tend to be completely controlled by one side or the other. In this election, Democrats were able to flip 3 legislative chambers to their side. That was the Michigan House, the Michigan Senate, and the Minnesota Senate. And so now there are 57 Republican chambers to 39 Democrat chambers. So even though there were some flips to the Democratic side, Republicans still dominate at the state level in terms of legislatures. And we can see there's one split legislature in Virginia, and Alaska and Pennsylvania are still kind of being decided at the moment. And this is a map of the gubernatorial results of the midterms. Democrats have performed above expectations in this category. Arizona, Maryland, and Massachusetts each replaced the Republican governor with a Democrat. But even with those flips, Republicans do hold a significant advantage at the gubernatorial level. They are projected to hold 26 governorships, while the Democrats will have 24. And then when you take those two together, the legislatures and the governor's offices, the level of divided government is at a historic low, actually. So right now, Democrats control 17 states completely, governor, House, Senate. And Republicans fully control 22 states, and 8 states are divided as of right now. And the last time the number of divided governments was this low was actually back in 1952. So it's a pretty interesting phenomenon, and I'm guessing that it's most likely due to the increased polarization that's going on in current politics, and states are doing a lot more work at that level than at the federal level. So what do these state level results mean for advocacy related to O&P? To sum things up, it'll become increasingly advantageous to work with the dominant party in a state. In divided governments, reaching across the aisle is a commonplace occurrence in order to gain a coalition that will pass legislation, and you need to do a lot of negotiation with the opposition party if things are more divided. But given the total control of one party or another in most states, it does make a lot of sense sometimes to begin working with the majority, at least as a starting point. But since a great deal of O&P related legislation is pretty bipartisan, it kind of has something for everybody. Building a healthy coalition across the political spectrum can be helpful as well. So it's not a one-size-fits-all case. Everything is on a state-by-state basis, if you will. And again, it's a lengthy iterative process, and you have to adjust the strategy depending on the makeup in each individual state. So essentially, that is all I have for you today about the 2022 midterm elections and kind of what they mean for our O&P advocacy venture. Does anybody have any questions?
No, Sam, I have a couple questions just regarding, it's kind of much more specific into the initiative for kids recreational project that I think Illinois is a part of. The thing that I'm curious as, is there specific language that's available to put into an amendment? We in Illinois have a parity law, a parity act that we could amend. It includes some good coverage for insurance right now for a variety of even some high-tech things. But is there available some language that we could incorporate into that? And the reason I say that is because we've actually lost some support, advocacy support from our Senate and our House reps that we've worked with for the last 20 years that have retired. So we need to really try to get focused on any language change that's very specific, that we don't have to kind of beat around the bush and try to convince too many other people, that it's valid. So that's my question from really a state level advocacy.
Mhm. So we do have model language that we're working on right now. We have two different versions. We have one that implements insurance fairness with the added provision of covering physical activity devices for children or adults, depending on the specific situation in each state. And then we also have another piece of model legislation that only amends the insurance fairness that's already in place to add that physical activity device provision. So if you'd like, I'd be happy to send that over to you.
Oh, that'd be great. Yes, that's exactly what I'm looking for. Yeah.
Great.
Because we're in a veto session right now, and we might possibly, right after Thanksgiving, be able to get that introduced pretty quickly. And then they can gnaw on until January session starts. So that would be great, Sam.
Absolutely. I can send that over to you.
That's awesome to hear, Jim. This is Nicole Verkeilen at AOPA, and just wanted to chime in and say I had met a few people recently with Dare to Try. I kind of go back a little ways with Dare to Try, but specifically their board president, who was kind of a former VP at Walgreens, and he was really interested in So Kids Can Move and wanting to bring it to Illinois. And Dare to Try is based in Illinois. Not sure if you're familiar with Melissa Stockwell, but and her
Yeah.
husband. Yeah, based in Illinois. So there's definitely a lot of advocates that are interested in this and bringing us to Illinois, and would be happy to connect you with any of those individuals if you're not already connected. But I will say that we've got great traction with this in New Mexico, and we've got a sponsor there already, and they're going to be introducing this legislation. And then I was on the call with Angela earlier this week. Thanks for having me, Angela, for Colorado, and we're trying to convince Colorado to do this too. So thanks for bringing that up, and would love for this to move forward in Illinois.
Yeah, Melissa, I know her real well. I was the CEO of Sheck and Cyrus for 40 years or something. So Melissa trained with us, and I actually took care of her early on when she was at Walter. Are there other basically local Illinois people that you've been in contact? Because Melissa's actually in Colorado now, but is there are there other Illinois local people that I'm not aware of that are involved with the kids recreational project?
There's no one that's kind of taken hold of it yet, but I was chatting with the adaptive sports organization Dare to Try, which is based in Illinois. I was there for a fundraiser that they had, and they've got a number of athletes and advocates that are interested in this. And then Carrie Sirota is their executive director, and she's interested in it as well. So they're all based in Illinois. But yeah, there's definitely some no one that's kind of taken charge of it and moving it forward, if that helps answer that. Yeah. Yeah,
because I've talked to Lori Johnson, who's with Hanger and has been involved in a lot of our state issues. You know Lori, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, okay. So I guess if we have a few people, it only takes a few to make this move, hopefully. So I'll be in touch with some of the Dare to Try folks too then. That's good to know.
That's great. Awesome.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Thanks for the information. Yeah, I'll look forward to that information or that language, Sam. Thank you.
Hey, Sam, this is Angela. I have, I'm sure, a very ignorant question, but I am new to all of this. I'm just learning. So when you were reviewing all of the House and Senate seats, how much does party affiliation affect it seems like our industry and the measures that we're proposing are really not party, they're pretty bipartisan things. So historically, have you seen that Republican or Democratic legislators are more or less supportive of our requests in ONP?
Oh, no, that's a great question. I think that our bill, at least, and a lot of other ONP bills, I think they are very bipartisan. They have a little something for everybody. because there are provisions that help with health outcomes that really help bring access to groups that are often overlooked in legislation. But then at the same time, there are also provisions that help save the government money in some cases and do so in the long run, whether it's preventing secondary conditions or by saving money on fraudulent practices in Medicare, for example. So there really is something for everyone, and the co-sponsors on our legislation are from both sides of the aisle.
So when you just reviewing all of the stuff that happened in the midterms, kind of really doesn't affect us. Is that true?
I would say that it doesn't affect us directly in that sense, that we still have most of our co-sponsors and our champions in both houses or in both chambers. It may affect federal legislation kind of generally,
Okay.
in the sense that it'll kind of create a little more gridlock when there's divided government.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, I can comment on Illinois on state politics. There definitely can be an impact of party affiliation. You know, with our parity bill and our licensing bill that will go way back to like 2000, we had probably nearly 100% bipartisan support on both. But when we look at basically rate increases for Medicaid and a project like, you know, the kids' recreation, it's going to hit basically the financial end of considerations. And that's where, you know, the Republican input basically has a slowdown impact. They want to look at the cost, not that the Democrats don't, but when you start dealing with some of the budgetary issues that increase the costs, there's a hard trade-off sometimes that I've seen in Illinois anyway. So you've got to have some very convincing language and some really good support to kind of bypass that slowdown of the train moving down the tracks.
Absolutely. It's tough because when there's one party in power, they can really set an agenda and push things through quickly. And if you're one of the lucky issues that kind of gets picked up, then it's a lot easier for you. But in a lot of times in divided government, there are opportunities for kind of, for lack of a better term, like grandstanding on the issues that you care about personally that make everyone's issues take a little bit longer. Any other questions? All right, well, I can move on to the Advocate of the Month giveaway, which I'm very excited to announce that will be going to Angela for your work with the Rocky Mountain Coalition. If you and Emma want to split it, I know both of you are on that call, you both have had a really big impact, you know, eat both of you a coffee or something like that.
Thanks, Sam.
Thanks, Sam.
Of course. And I will be contacting you shortly after this for your prize. And I really appreciate both of you for coming on. I know that it's so close to the Thanksgiving holiday, so everyone's kind of busy and moving around and things like that.
Awesome.
We appreciate you sharing this today.
Yeah, you guys have been such a huge help to us.
No problem. Yeah, we're always here. So please let us know if you need anything. And Jim, I'll send you the model language after this as well.
Great. Thanks, Sam.
All right. With that, I can give you guys a couple minutes of your day back if that sounds good to you.
Sounds great.
Okay. Thanks, AOPA.
All right.
Good job.
Thanks,
AOPA.
everyone.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Jim.
Thank you.
Thanks, Angela and Emma.